it's Reagan, and today I'm here to do a very exciting videos. In fact, one of my favorite videos to always film every single year, and that is the top 10 books I hope to read in 2019. The reason why I really love to film this video, one, it's for a lot of reasons. I love lists, I love making checklists for myself, but more than that, I really like it because it allows me to really hone in on kind of my overall 2019 reading goals. What kind of books do I really want to prioritize going on to this year, etc., etc. Last year, I was really happy with everything I ultimately read. I really read so much amazing fantasy. I really kind of pushed myself to read those longer books that I had been putting off year after year. Keeping that in mind for 2019, I definitely want to continue that trend of tackling really large fantasy novels and definitely try some new series, but I also want to introduce a few more genres that I've been maybe kind of putting aside, actually through last year. But anyway, without further ado, let's dive into the video. So the first set of books I'm going to talk about are by Brandon Sanderson. I feel like 2018 was the Sanderson year for me. I read so many of his books that I loved, and I loved every single one of them. That being said, I don't have that many left to read, but there are a few I definitely want to prioritize in 2019. The first one is Elantris, which is actually Brandon Sanderson's first novel, and a book that I haven't read by him. I think this is the last high fantasy novel of his that I own that I haven't read, so I definitely want to get to this year. I'm really sad that I am running out, but I know there's a lot of short stories and middle grade books out there by him that I haven't read still. I'm not so desperate yet, but this is definitely a book that's on the top of my list. But it's basically about like a fated city. Elantris was once a really powerful city, but has since decayed and lost all of its like glory, and I think this book is about that city kind of gaining its magic back, perhaps? I'm not totally sure, but I am excited to read it, a little sad to read it, but mostly excited. Speaking of Brandon Sanderson, I also want to reread the Final Empire trilogy this year, the first trilogy. I loved this. This was my first Brandon Sanderson series I had ever read. It was about 5 years ago when I first read it, loved every single second of it. But I realized last year in reading the second trilogy to the Mistborn world that there's a lot I actually have forgotten from this original trilogy, and I would actually love to reread it with like a new set of eyes, especially now that I have so much like Cosmere knowledge. I want to try to catch some things that might be like important to the overall universe. But anyway, I really love this series. I know I'm gonna love it, and I think it would be a perfect commute series throughout the year. I'm also gonna try to get Clay to read this series this year, so wish me luck on that. Next up is a genre that I definitely neglected last year, and that is literary fiction. I'm definitely gonna try to read more literary fiction going into 2019. The book is A Gentleman in Moscow by Amor Towles. This is a really popular and very acclaimed book that came out a few years ago that's always really interested me. It basically follows a disgraced count who's deemed kind of a political enemy when the Bolsheviks take over during the Russian Revolution, and he is bound to house arrest in this hotel, and from there I think it's all about his like new relationships with everyone who lives and works in this hotel. Again, it just sounds really interesting. It's a time in history that I am always fascinated to read about, and I've heard really great things about this, so definitely want to try to get to this year. Next book that I really want to get to is Renegades by Marissa Mayer. I read a few sci-fi novels last year and loved every single one of them, so I definitely want to try to read more sci-fi going into 2019. Particularly this series is very popular on BookTube, so I really want to give it a try as well. The second book recently came out, so I know it's a great opportunity to marathon. This is a sci-fi novel that's apparently very fast-paced. It follows two main characters. One is out for justice and one is out for revenge, and they team up in an unlikely, partnership. And this is a book that will keep me on the edge of my seat and blindside me with incredible plot points. Again, heard great things, so I definitely want to read this as well. Speaking of very popular books on BookTube, The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo by Taylor Jenkins Reid. I've heard so many wonderful things about this story, and this just follows an aging, reclusive Hollywood starlet as she recounts her 7 husbands throughout her life. I don't know too much more than that, but I think it's like a very incredible story that's emotional, but also a page turner. Yeah, this novel I feel like was many people's favorites of last year, so I feel like I really need to give it a try and give it a read this year. Speaking of expanding my fantasy reading, I think it's time for me to finally try to start Steven Erikken's Gardens of the Moon series. This is the first book to a many book series that is very, 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 very rich, detailed, and complicated. I've heard that this series can be a little difficult to get into, but once you do, it is incredible. I can't tell you honestly like what the main plot points of this is about because it's so huge. I just know it's about a kingdom and lots of discontented people in that kingdom. Yeah, it simmers with discontent, bled dry by warfare, bitter infighting, and bloody confrontations with ancient sorcerers. So I imagine this is a world of lots of different wars, lots of different political alliances, and you know, lots of different maneuverings. So it's time, I feel like, to read this. It's time. Next up, I have The Raven Boys by Maggie Stiefvater. This is a carryover, I think, from last year. I never picked up this series. I still haven't read this whole series. I think it's a little wild. I need to reread the first one, The Raven Boys, and hopefully finish this quartet. This is a very well-loved series on BookTube that I just never have gotten around to finishing. I feel like I'm gonna really enjoy it. It's about a group of boys called the Raven Boys, and our main character, Blue, who's from a psychic family. Basically, at the beginning of the first one, she sees that she falls in love with a boy who dies when she kisses him, I think. Basically, they then group up together and they try to find these magical ley lines. It's quirky, it's interesting, it's weird. I think I need to reread it, so here we are. Next up, I have Pachinko by Min-Jin Lee. This is an incredibly popular novel that I've also heard incredible things about and picked up midway last year and just need to prioritize reading, just like The Gentleman of Moscow. This is actually a family epic that follows 4 generations of a poor, proud immigrant family fighting to control their destinies, exiled from the homeland they will never know. It sounds incredibly interesting. Again, I've only heard incredible things about this book, and I am trying to prioritize reading more diversely this year, and I just feel like this is a book I definitely need to get to. And the last 2 books that are on my top 10 list are kind of cheating, only because I'm cheating my own rules. And that when I made this list, I was trying to only pick books that I already own, no upcoming releases, as there are so many, but there are 2 books coming out this year that I had to add to this list. One, because they're really long and I want to make sure I prioritize reading them, but 2, they are just big books and huge series that I love so much that I just feel like it's important to mention them, so we're going to do it. First book is Deathcaster by Cinda Williams-Chima, which is the 4th book to the spin-off series to the Seven Realms world. This is the Shattered Realms world. I love this series so much. I've been reading Cinda Williams-Chima's books since I was 12, and they're always books that I love and make me happy, even though they hurt me on the inside because they can be really intense and sad. But I believe this is the 4th and concluding novel to the Shattered Realms series, so I am anticipating it so much, especially because each and every book in this extension series has just been upping the ante every single time. It is incredible. As I always say, yes, you have to read the Seven Realms series before you can read the Shattered Realms series, but the 4th book in this world is one that I cannot wait to get my hands on. March, please come faster. And the very last book I'm gonna mention is The Burning White, which is the 5th book to the Lightbringer series, which is another series I've been reading for a long time. However, this book I've been waiting to read, I wanna say like 3 years. I have been checking every year to see when this book is gonna come out. I really love this series. It definitely has some flaws, a huge wide cast of characters. Some characters you love, like there are so many people in this series I find fascinating, even if I hate them. And then moving on, some characters you hate, including for me, like I don't particularly love the main character. He's fascinating to read about, but he's kind of a jerk, let's be real. Kind of a jerk, and he thinks the world revolves around him. But anyway, this 5th book of this series is one that I have been really highly anticipating. I am a really big fan of this world. I think the magic system is super interesting. So I can't wait to see if this is the concluding novel or if we have to wait for a book 6. Man. Those are the top 10 books I want to read in 2019. Let me know down below some books you really hope to get to in the new year, as I would love to know. And I'll see you guys soon with another video soon. Goodbye.